Good evening, I'm Norman Robinson and welcome to Affordable Housing Matters. Did you know that the month of April is the National Fair Housing Month? This national anniversary was established to increase the efforts to end housing discrimination and raise the awareness of fair housing rights. The month also remembers the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968 and his contributions to the civil rights movement. On tonight's show, we will discuss the importance of fair housing, what battles we are currently fighting in New Orleans, and discuss an event taking place in conjunction with Fidelity Bank to bring local awareness to this issue. We have a great show planned for you this evening, so don't go far.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
Hello, in honor of National Fair Housing Month, we have two guests here to discuss the importance of identifying and combating housing discrimination. Joining me now is Mr. Maxwell Ciardullo of the Greater New Orleans Fair Housing Action Center and Ms. Deana Veal, Senior Vice President and Compliance Director of Fidelity Bank. Hello and welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies first, because we defer to ladies, we're gentlemen, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. What do you do and why?
My name is Deana Veal, as you said. I'm the Compliance Director at Fidelity Bank, and my role is to make sure that the bank operates within the regulatory requirements of the federal and state law, and also to make sure that we're serving the community and meeting the needs of our community as well.
Mr. Ciardullo?
Sure. So the Greater New Orleans Fair Housing Action Center is a 24-year-old civil rights nonprofit based here in New Orleans, but serving the whole state of Louisiana. And our job is to fight against housing discrimination and housing segregation, and we do that through educational efforts to make sure that everyone from landlords and housing providers to tenants and first-time home buyers understand their rights and obligations under the Fair Housing Act. And we also do investigations and testing, where we send out mystery shoppers, equally paired folks, to test our housing providers and make sure that they're treating people equally. And pro bono legal support to folks who have been discriminated against. And then we also do some housing counseling for folks who might be at risk of losing their home. And my job is to actually try and work to create new policies that will protect people and create new protections for folks.
And what's significant about the month of April when it comes to the National Fair Housing Act?
Yeah, so thank you for asking. April 11th is the 51st anniversary of the passage of the Fair Housing Act in 1968. It was passed 1 week after Dr. King was assassinated, and actually the Fair Housing Act was the third of the main civil rights acts that languished for years in Congress, and it was only after his assassination and the outrage that followed that we were able to get this passed. And so April 11th, April is what we celebrate Fair Housing Month.
And what
every
is
year.
special about this coming celebration?
So well, for 7 years now, we've had a community crawfish boil to celebrate the Fair Housing Month, and so we're doing that again. And so we're happy to be here to talk about that and talk about our supporters. Fidelity Bank is helping make that happen. And so we do that just to try and engage the community, get people to come out, understand and know their rights, and learn about our services. And so it's going to be April 11th, 5:30 to 7:30 at the Arts Estuary Building, which is 1024 Elysian Fields Avenue. It's free and open to the public, and we want to see folks, so bring your family and bring your friends.
Oh, so it's free and open to the public.
That's right.
And I can get some questions answered while I'm there, right?
Questions and crawfish. We do it all.
What an unbeatable combination, questions and crawfish. Ms. Veal, how is Fidelity Bank involved with the Fair Housing Action Center event?
Well, for this event, we're helping to offset some of the cost of that event since it is free, and we're also going to have a table out there where some of our mortgage lenders will be, and they'll be there to provide information on the mortgage lending products that we offer, as well as answer any questions that applicants may have.
And let me ask you this, how does fair housing affect banks?
Well, we all have the right to be free of discrimination in rental, purchase, or financing of housing. So the Fair Housing Act establishes guidelines that lenders have to follow to ensure that applicants aren't discriminated against on a prohibited basis, to make sure that they're all treated equally and not denied unnecessarily for credit due to any of those prohibited bases.
Are there any examples of banks violating the FHA, and what are the consequences?
There's actually a lot.
Really?
Significant, yeah, there really is. Significantly, in the last year, there's been a lot of talk about the city of Miami actually filed suit against Bank of America because Bank of America was setting, they call them predatory lending terms, and these terms, the rates were really high. They do teaser rates where they'd entice you with the lowest rate possible, but the rate would skyrocket once you actually were accepted to get the loan. So you're seeing a lot of foreclosures. So the city had had enough, and the city actually filed suit, and the Supreme Court upheld that decision, saying Miami City had the right to file that suit, and it was a violation of the Fair Housing Act. Philadelphia did the same thing. They sued Wells Fargo for very similar practices. So you see not just the CFPB or the FDIC enforcing this, your cities have actually had enough, and it's a negative impact for cities to have to see the consequences of these actions as well. So there's pretty significant civil money penalties with these.
How closely related to this kind of thing is what's called redlining?
That's exactly what it is.
That's exactly what it is?
That's exactly what it is. Redlining, that would be an example. There's a minority census tract that Wells Fargo or Bank of America or any of these banks that are not following the lending laws like they should, they'll target an area, a high minority area, and give less favorable terms. And you know, we'll almost see a map where you see where these loans were concentrated or where lenders aren't providing these credit term or available credit to these census tracts. And they call it redlining because you can almost draw a line on a map and see the effect of these practices.
Mr. Ciardullo, what kind of problems are we currently experiencing in the New Orleans area?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think a good transition. I really appreciate you bringing some of those issues up because I think it makes it clear that the Fair Housing Act was not just about individual discrimination, it's also about these big systemic issues. And so one of the ones that I'll mention that's related to that is there was a report released earlier this week that shows that New Orleanians are being put out of their home at a rate twice the national average. So our eviction rate is skyrocketing in the last couple of years, and we just finally getting data on this. And the folks who compiled this, they mapped it and can show that it's still in these areas that were redlined in the 30s by the federal government. They literally drew red lines around neighborhoods and said, we're not going to support loans in these neighborhoods. It's in those neighborhoods where we're putting people out at even higher rates. So it's you know, twice the national rate, but in some of these neighborhoods it's up to 4 times the national rate.
So do we know who they are when you say they are putting these people out?
Sure, I'm talking about landlords are putting out renters.
So these are landlords. We're not talking about banks.
No, but I'm just trying to draw that connection that,
that
the same neighborhoods that were disinvested from 80 years ago are still feeling the effects. They have higher eviction rates, they have higher rates of lots of other issues, and so I think it's just there's a bit of a through line there.
So what's going on there? What's taking place in those areas? That
a lot of it is I think it's largely a symptom of our affordability crisis, and that's not something that's unique to New Orleans, but it's certainly happening here. We have a lot of folks who are paying far more than they can cover far more of their income than they can afford on rent and utilities each month. And we're seeing people pushed out of neighborhoods that had formerly been affordable and formerly that are close to jobs, they're close to public transit, they're close to grocery stores. And they used to be affordable to people and now they're not. So we're seeing serious displacement rates, that's part of it. There's a bit of a connection here to short-term rentals and Airbnb as well, because you can make so much more money renting to tourists than to actual New Orleanians. In some cases, people are taking the rental property and they're kicking out our residents and instead turning those into short-term rentals. So there's some piece of that that's connected to it as well.
So how do you as an agency counteract that?
So we're fighting it on all fronts. I think there's no silver bullet, but one of the things that we are really excited about that happened just this week is the City Council voted unanimously in favor of what we're calling the smart housing mix. And the idea behind that is that when someone builds a new luxury apartment building, they have to include some percentage of affordable units as well, units affordable to sort of your typical worker here. And that's the kind of thing that not only does it make sure that we're always creating new affordable housing, but it creates it in exactly the neighborhoods where people are being pushed out, in those neighborhoods that are close to jobs, that are close to banks, are close to public transit. It's really an anti-segregation measure, and so we're really excited about that. It's not quite done yet, though, so I'd ask folks if they're interested to stay in touch with us, and we'll tell them how they can get involved in making sure it's a reality.
This problem of fair housing seems to me, at least I'm thinking about one of my science projects when we had to find out what an amoeba does and how it exists and why. It keeps morphing, and so with this morphing effect, it takes on different characteristics. So as someone who is responsible for monitoring this for Fidelity Bank, how do you keep up with what's going on, and how do you stay current?
It is ever changing, right? So Fidelity Bank has been a part of the community for quite some time. Last year we celebrated our 110th anniversary. So
oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And being a part of our community is really important to all of us, and I think that culture trickles down from our board of directors to our executive management, and it's important to us to make sure that we do meet the needs of our community because we have been such a part of it. So we try to do that by volunteering, by always trying to support groups like this here, and supplying not just financial help to these, but also people, and put our face out there and constantly trying to keep up with the needs of the community by reconsidering what products we offer. Can we offer a product that might better help specific needs that we see in the community? And then a big part of my job is understanding the regulations, the impact of not following those regulations, and stressing that importance by training, by our policies, by our whole compliance management system in the bank to follow the federal laws, follow the state laws, but also to really follow our culture of being here for good and making sure our employees, you can work at a bank anywhere, but we have a really unique opportunity because we are a community bank. And I feel as though that's very impactful, and we want all of our employees, our team members to feel that way too.
A lot of people don't understand the difference between when you talk about community bank. I think they kind of gloss over that. Okay? So I'm a community bank, big deal. So what does that mean? So
we're actually a really unique community bank because we don't have shareholders. So if you have a deposit account at Fidelity Bank, you own part of our bank. And so you're able to come to the shareholders meetings and have your voice. So that makes us we're a mutual, so a very unique part of the New Orleans area. Our shareholders don't worry about how much our stocks are worth, you know. Our value is our customers. So that gives us a different perspective on our customers because you're our owners. So I think that's one of the biggest differentiating factors Fidelity has.
Is that one of the reasons why such a relationship, Mr. Ciardullo, with Fidelity Bank is important for the Greater New Orleans Fair Housing Action Center?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we are always looking to partner with folks who are trying to serve the community, and I think this is an excellent partnership, and we're really grateful to have it.
How has that benefited you up to this point?
Well, it's our partners like Fidelity Bank, who make sure that we can get our message out to folks. You know, I think a lot of people don't always know that they're being discriminated against because they don't understand the laws and the protections that are available to them, or they don't know where to go even if they do think something's happened. And so, you know, our services are only good as people who know about them. And so this really helps magnify our reach and make sure people understand how they can get help.
You mentioned that some people don't know that they're being discriminated against. What are some of the clues? What are some of the warning signs? Sure.
Well, and I say that because oftentimes what it looks like is maybe you're calling about a rental unit and someone says, "Sure, it's available. Come on by," and then you go out to see it, and it turns out the leasing agent says, "Well, actually, we just rented it. I'm sorry, you got here a little late." And that's the sort of thing that that could happen. It might not be discrimination. You wouldn't really know it one way or the other unless someone else was going out, you know, to test it and see if they were treated the same way. And so it's a violation that is often underreported. And so we want to make sure that folks understand that if anything feels a little bit fishy, call us and we can check.
Are there other examples? You talked about that.
Sure.
As one.
Yeah,
what,
I mean,
what
I
are
think,
some of the other?
Well, and let me also just state, so the protected classes for folks we're talking, because I think when we talk about housing discrimination, folks think immediately about race, and that's still very much a problem. Our investigations show about a 50% discrimination rate against black renters in the greater New Orleans area still. But it also protects folks based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, and family status, which is whether or not you have children. So we see a lot of folks who are denied because landlords don't want to rent to people with children. And sometimes they'll even be so explicit as to put that in their advertisement, which is patently illegal. But if you ever see an advertisement that says no children, that's absolutely against the Fair Housing Act.
So it's a violation to deny rental space to people with children? Because I mean, I remember when I was a youngster, 25, you know, just a couple of years ago, the apartment that my wife and I were renting changed over to a policy of no children allowed, so we had to move, and that was in 1976. So was there a violation there that I missed?
I mean, it certainly sounds like it could have been. There's only a few exceptions, and that's if a building is entirely for people, you know, elderly folks. But otherwise, and that sounds like it could definitely be something that we should have looked into.
You wanted to jump in?
Well, and I was going to say, in 1966, when the Fair Housing Act was established, they eventually ended up adding more prohibited bases, and likely that was a reason why. They were seeing, okay, not only do we have race or color discrimination, but now we're seeing familial status, and that's for anyone who has children under the age of 18. So we see a lot in the credit, in the lending. That's something that we always talk about, because from a lending standpoint, probably a little bit different reasons, but they think of it as maybe an income issue. If you have children, maybe you won't be able to afford this house. And those are things that you can't hold against an applicant, you know, and that's something that you were seeing a while back, but I feel as though we are making great strides and great improvements with organizations and banks paying attention to these type of practices.
Since the ball is back in your court, in the court of banking, what are some of the other warning signs about credit discrimination?
So if you're an applicant and you get denied for a credit, you have a right to know what the basis of that credit decision was. If you feel as though the terms aren't being clearly disclosed to you, ask. In 2015, there were a lot of lending regulations that were changed and updated, and the meaning behind that was to make sure consumers had clear and concise disclosures. So you're entitled to know the terms of that loan. If you're feeling pressured into signing and you don't fully understand, you have the right, and the lender is obligated to make sure you understand what you're getting into. Obviously, we want to avoid the financial crisis we had gone through previously, but and then making sure that your terms are similar to other creditors or credit applicants that are in a similarly situated credit situation as you.
As a layperson who is not as well versed, well, who's not versed at all in the ins and outs of this kind of transaction, what do I do as a consumer?
You should talk to your lender, and if your lender is not being forthcoming, then go submit a formal written request for more information. If that doesn't help, call your compliance director. There's people within the bank that you have the right to get in touch with, and that's something as the compliance director, I personally handle all customer complaints. So if someone was to say, hey, I don't feel like I was treated fairly, I'm going to investigate that and make sure that, because compliance is a little bit unbiased, we're not actually a part of that, any department, we're a bit set apart, so it's our obligation to make sure that such inquiries are handled properly.
So how am I as a consumer to be confident that the compliance officer, who's also working for the bank, is going to be fair to me?
Right.
With a complaint against that very same bank.
Right. So if you feel as though you're a compliance officer or anyone you're talking to in the bank is brushing you aside and you still can't get your answers, there's other, FDIC has a complaint process for consumers to go to. Fair Housing, HUD has a complaint process you can go through. CFPB. They have really improved the complaint process for consumers to make sure their voices are heard.
So even if I'm having a credit discrimination issue, I can come to the Fair Housing
Yes, we would absolutely
Center?
encourage anyone who has any suspicions that they may be being discriminated against to please contact us. It's 504-596-2100. 504-596-2100.
And how difficult is it, I mean, to really determine if there is discrimination?
I mean, we do thorough investigations because any investigation that we have to do would have to hold up in court. So we don't mess around with that. But there is a very clear process that's been laid out and tested for decades to really sort of make that case. I mean, and honestly, this is something that literally stretches back to the civil rights movement. That's how Dr. King and his allies were testing realtors in Chicago in the 60s. They were bringing equally paired families, one black, one white, same credit score, same income, similar jobs to folks asking to purchase homes or find rental apartments and seeing how they were treated differently.
Are there recent cases where you've conducted investigations that you can talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the more high-profile cases that we filed recently, this hasn't been decided yet, so it's all allegations at this point, is an uptown housing provider who there were allegations that he was sexually harassing his female tenants and discriminating based on sex, so only renting, allegations he was only renting to women. And so we talked to folks who had rented there before and also folks who had worked for him. And then also we sent out testers, women and men, to see how they were treated differently. And in our testing, all of the women got calls back and most of them got meetings with the housing provider, and none of the men did. And so that was part of what was referenced in the court complaint.
We're coming to the close of our program, Ms. Veal. Is there anything you want to add that you think our viewers would benefit from?
Really just to recap everything we've talked about, if you feel as though there's been any type of discriminatory practice, reach out, get answers, reach out to your lenders and get those answers you deserve. If you can't resolve it, then go about it at different means, but making sure that all of our community banks, all of our big banks, that we're all providing that equal credit access and the similar terms to all of our borrowers is really a very big part of our lending practice.
What about you, Mr. Ciardullo?
Well, just again want to invite people to come out to the Crawfish Boil. It's April 11th, 5:30 to 7:30 at the Arts Estuary Building. And you can find more information on our website at GNO Fair Housing, and you can follow us on Facebook at GNO Fair Housing.
All right, thank you to the both of you. It's been a very informative session.
Great, thank
and
you.
Good luck to you, and save some crawfish for me.
Well, I'd love to have you. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. We will be right back to wrap up the show right after this break. You are watching Affordable Housing Matters on WLAE.
Open up your books to page 360.
Did you just look at your phone while you was in class? You played yourself.
Talking about inspirational quotes.
You gotta believe in yourself. Don't ever play yourself. The key is to make it, so make it.
Louise, can you give me an example of an inspirational quote?
Don't play yourself. The key is to make it.
And who said that?
I did. Now that's a major key alert.
Learn the real major keys to getting to college at getschool.com.
We would again like to thank tonight's guests, Mr. Maxwell Ciardullo and Ms. Deana Veal, for joining us tonight. And again, if you are in need of assistance in combating housing discrimination, please call 504-596-2100 or email info@gnofairhousing.org. Also, if you would like to rewatch this or any other past episodes of Affordable Housing Matters, please go to WLAE.com and click on the programming link. There, all past episodes of this program can be viewed. I would like to thank you all again for joining us this evening. I'm Norman Robinson. Have a good night.